I'm independent. You know it. You love it. You can't live without it. Rockland World Radio.
Welcome to Lighten Up, a show about bringing more love, light, and joy into your life, and archived on the Lighten Up program page. Please join us in the chat room by clicking on the chat room icon located on the left-hand side of our menu bar. Now the host of Lighten Up, Isabel Merians.
Welcome to Lighten Up with Isabel, our good news show. Each time I try to bring the audience ways of bringing more love and light and joy into our lives. And today I hope to do that exactly, and with a few additions. Part of my good news is my guest, Hercules Invictus.
I'm greatly honored to be here.
Well, you're very kind. It's a joy to have you here.
Thank you.
And he has told me that he sees himself as a lifetime explorer of life's mysteries.
That is indeed true.
And that's quite, and I might add, a consummate master of the art of reinvention. Can I say that?
I've lived many lives in this lifetime.
I think so. I think some of us have. And before I go ahead and speak with you about your life, I'd like to bring some good news. First of all, I just found out that America has determined that it will no longer do medical and scientific experiments on chimpanzees. So I thank Hercules' beautiful wife, Athena, for giving me that information just before the program started. I have a lot of other good news. One is that SeaWorld is going to end its orca whale show. So that's good news. There's an Israeli restaurant that gives half off if the couple eating together are an Israeli and a Jew. Inmates at a prison in South Dakota repaired more than 1,300 bicycles and gave them to underprivileged children around the state this year. Lots of good news. There's an organization called Justice for Veterans, and it's an organization that was formed to help veterans with mental illness and substance abuse get treatment rather than jail time. So lots of good news going on in the world, and of course our Thanksgiving is coming up, which is always a good news holiday because it gives us an opportunity to think about living our life in gratitude, which I speak about very, very often. So it's interesting because we're doing this program today, and of course we're all very aware of the terrorist attacks in Paris and the pain that that has caused. And so to be able to bring good news today is doubly important, I feel. Don't you think so?
Indeed.
So it was interesting. Stephen Colbert said that anything that is an attempt at human connection in the world right now is a positive thing to do. And this should begin to bring out the best in us rather than the fearfulness and the negative side.
There's no doubt that many things happen, things that are pleasant and things that are unpleasant, but we do have the ability to choose what we want to focus on. And as you just pointed out with all your items, there's a lot of wonderful things happening in the world at the same time, and they deserve our attention as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, now, I just want to say a little bit more before we start with your interview. I've spoken many times on this program about living a life in gratitude, and I found out recently that a group of scientists at University of California in Berkeley have been studying exactly that for years, and they have found out that people who live a life in gratitude are healthier, happier, more socially engaged, and generally have a much better quality of life.
I can believe that.
So it was nice to find out the science is kind of on the same page. Another thing I think we should think about is right now is attempting acts of kindness, being the best person that we can be, speaking positively and appreciatively. And this can apply to anyone you meet, whether it's the person who packs your groceries in the supermarket. I always thank the packers, to whomever, but small acts of kindness and being the best person that we can be are very important things. So let's remember to be thankful, and this Thanksgiving, instead of just thinking about how delicious food is, let's give some real thought to the wonderful joys in her life. And now I would like to speak about you, Hercules.
Oh, thank you.
I know that you've spent decades in human services, education, and entertainment, and that you currently own the Olympus Mythic Entertainment Company. So
Yes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your journey and how you have gone into each of these fields and been effective. So would you be good enough to do that?
Sure. Do I start at the beginning, or where would you like me to start?
Maybe when you finish college, I don't know. Is that
Okay.
the beginning point?
That's actually the middle part. It took me
Oh,
13 years to finish my college education.
Okay.
I was born Greek American in this country. I was conceived in Greece but born here. And when I was growing up, there was a Greek American culture which kind of started forming in the 40s and the 50s and had many of the values of that time. And then there was Greek culture, and then there was American culture. So I grew up in three different cultural milieus which didn't always agree with each other. So just a quick example, Greek-American culture was, again, very 40s and 50s. Greek culture had moved past the 40s and the 50s, but it extended into the misty past.
Which was exciting.
The time of the gods and the titans, the time of the ancient heroes.
Yeah.
So being part of Greek culture was you were part of a stream that extended, from the dawn of time into futures as yet unguessed. So you're part of something that was ancient and holy.
Which is exciting. That's very exciting. So now, your name, Hercules
Yes.
Invictus, I ask you how you got that name, Hercules.
Hercules, my birth name was Panayotis, which does not translate into English. So
Panayotis?
Panayotis. It means he who is most holy or dedicated to the Queen of Heaven, depending on which way you choose to interpret it. So since it doesn't translate into English, and I got stuck with names I didn't like for much of my early life, I translated it Hercules because Hercules means dedicated to Hera, who is the ancient Queen of Heaven.
Queen of Heaven, I know. That's so interesting. Now, do you think we should give the audience a little clue into how we met? Because I think that's a fun story.
Yes. Would you like to tell the tale, or should I?
Well, I'll start it and you can continue.
Okay, very well.
Actually, I produced a play called Harlots and Heresy, and at the time we had not fully casted the play, and I was thinking to myself, maybe we're going to find someone to play Samson. And I read in the local paper that someone named Hercules Invictus was speaking at the Cresco Library, and I thought, wow, anybody who can call himself Hercules, I've got to meet this person. So sure enough, that evening I went with a friend and enjoyed the lecture, and afterwards said to you, have you ever done any acting? And you said...
Not really. I had a television show at one point, and I...
That's entertainment.
I did entertainment, but last time I acted was actually in I think elementary school. The last time I acted.
But anyhow, Hercules looked the part, and the good news was that I also got my main goddess, who is Athena, his wife, who was wonderful in the show as well. So that's how we got to know each other.
And we've since become good friends. Isabel is awesome.
Yeah, you're being kind. So anyhow, I didn't mean to interrupt your story.
Okay, so there was the Greek-American culture, and there was the Greek culture, and the American culture, which didn't have thousands of years behind it, looked toward the future. So everything was in the future, and the mythology was in the future. So you can have several responses to having three different realities thrown at you as a kid. One is you could become Greek-American, or you could reject that and become American, or you could reject that and become Greek. Back at that time, first-generational people from old cultures had the choice of going schizophrenic, which later on when I got into the human services, I belonged to the Greek-American Behavioral Sciences Institute, and they studied that. And then the choice that I took was to realize that these cultures are just ways of explaining reality and its rules, and that none of them are true. They're just what people decided to agree on. So once that realization struck me, I started asking myself, are these the stories I want to live? And if they're not, what story do I personally want to live? And that became my life's adventure.
Well, you always say, if you call Hercules and he doesn't pick up the phone, the message on the phone is, "This is Hercules, I'm out adventuring." And I always think that's a good way to answer the phone.
Thank you. I get teased about that quite a lot.
I like that. I think adventuring is good. All right, I'm sorry, didn't mean to.
No. So I started experimenting, and because my name did translate as Hercules, and I grew up during the Peplum era when Steve Reeves and Reg Park and all these muscle men were appearing in Hercules movies. Mm-hmm. So that was a part of my growing up too, as were the stories of Hercules being an ancestor, because I come from Lemnos, which is the Isle of the Amazons in the Argonaut legends. Mm-hmm. So Hercules and the Amazons stayed there for an entire year, and they had children, and the children eventually, became the rulers of the island. Okay. So I grew up with those stories as well. So back in high school, I had asked my mother to make me one of these Hercules outfits, mm-hmm. and I started wandering around New York City and having adventures. So that contributed to my path as well.
As Hercules.
And I tried various cultural, interpretations of Hercules. The one I spent the most time with was the Northern Thor.
Right.
So I took Thor, and I took the concept of the barbarian, which was also a version of Hercules, mm-hmm. In heroic fantasy, and I became Thor the Barbarian. And I did that for about a decade plus a few years, and that led to a television show, to a movie, to appearing like Where's Waldo and a bunch of other movies, and occasionally having a line to speak, to a number of e-radio shows, and that part of me I left behind in Pennsylvania, content in our home in the woods, and so that kind of ended well with Thor the Barbarian.
With Thor the Barbarian. And did you see the film Conan the Barbarian?
Oh, Conan is one of my favorites. He's one of my inspirations. Conan is what Hercules' life would have been like if he made the wrong choice. And instead of dedicating his life to service, he dedicated it to his own desires. Yes. So Conan, was always had a different motivation, but it was still part of the Herculean path. So the whole barbarian archetype resonated very deeply.
I must say that the transition from Hercules to Samson was very smooth. You did a great job.
I enjoyed that very much. That was a lot of fun, and I got deeply into it. And I believe that the future casts shadows into the present. And several years ago, I became very focused on Samson. And I bought like Samson poster and like a Samson action figure, and my wife was wondering, what is this fixation? Especially since Samson rants against the uncircumcised, and I'm Greek, so I'm uncircumcised. But there was this whole thing with Samson. I kept saying, I don't know why this is important, but I feel very strongly that this is important. And it was. Like 5 years later, it became very important, and I recognized the opportunity when it presented itself, so it was a no-brainer to pick the path, because...
Well, you did a great job.
Well, thank you very much.
And, of course, Samson, to his people, represented supposedly wisdom and leadership and force and power. And Hercules also, for his people, represented, trying to do good and so forth.
Yeah, they are much the same, and in fact, during the centuries preceding the Common Era, representations in the Near East that show a muscle man wrestling a lion, scholars have a difficult time deciding if they're depicting Samson or Hercules, because both of them were known for wrestling with lions.
Interesting. Well, I know that the ancient name of, I think it was the Babylonian sun god was Shamash-On.
Yes.
So that Samson figures right into that myth as well. Okay, well, so now tell me, where are we in your journey?
In my journey right now, since September 11th, the world has become very different. So before I kept my birth name as kind of like my legal name, my documents and were under that name and I paid taxes and so forth. It became very difficult to, reinvent yourself without going through ordeals. Right. So I decided, I had to think about, like, who am I? And what I came to after much consideration was because of my resonances with Hercules, being born during the Peplum era and being born a Lemnian Greek, and the translation of my name being Hercules, according to one way of translating it, and the fact that I started dressing up as Hercules when I was very young, and I prefer that translation of my name, and that's kind of like my default, in between being Thor the Barbarian and being Pythor and being the Dagda and all these other variations. I've always fallen back to Hercules or Iraklis or Heracles, which are other iterations of the name. So since that's my default person, and when I used to teach, I used to give lectures at LaGuardia Community College. They used to pay me $75 to come in and tell the story about how most people get into the human services because they want to do something to help a particular bunch of people. But for me, it was the way I chose to be Hercules in this day and age, because and to live my life, that I was fighting social ills, instead of hydras. But that's what I was actually doing in my head. So it became a no-brainer that this is who I am. So I legally changed my name, and this way, if people ask me, "Are you really Hercules?" it's like I can say yes instead of telling them the whole story. So this is the last time you get to hear the story, folks. Because the world is different. Before, I did a lot of human services and education, and now the types of opportunities that were there before are no longer there. I decided to focus more on the entertainment, which was always part of who I was. Right. So during this process of reinvention and getting in touch with my inner self, we decided to form a mythic entertainment company called Mount Olympus. Right. And through Mount Olympus, we do various interactive storytelling games for kids. We do interactive workshops for adults. This will soon be joined by performances for adults. And we are also doing events. And our first event is going to be in April of 2016 in Tenafly, New Jersey. And it'll be called Heroicon, where people can get in touch with their inner hero, and we want people to come in costume as their own hero or as their favorite superhero or ancient hero. We're going to have Greek sword fighting and spear fighting. We're going to have people from Atlantis, filling the town, so it should be a lot of fun.
It sounds like fun. Well, the thing that strikes me about all of this is that there's always an element of fun in what you do.
Of course. Life is short. You have to have fun.
I think that's a very joyous way to view life, that there should be fun, because there's enough seriousness and heaviness, that we really have to remember to have more fun in our lives. I think that's really exciting.
And it is a matter of where you choose to focus. I'm not going to share the name, but somebody very close to me is going through a very difficult time, and he's feeling very down. And again, I can understand. But the way he was looking at his situation, that was a choice, and it was an understandable choice. But this is somebody who I actually admire in many ways. So instead of focusing on the things he was focusing on, he actually figured out what he wanted to do when he was a small child, which most people do not. It took me a whole lifetime to get to where I said, okay, I've known this is what I wanted to do, and I've done it kind of, but now I'm going to do it. He decided as a child, and he knew that, and he stuck with it, and he practiced endlessly. His play was practicing for his profession, and he has stuck through his profession with all its ups and downs and is known in his profession. So to me, that's a very positive thing. And when I go through difficult times, I focus on, okay, I got to deal with the situation, but I've done this and I'm doing this, and that's pretty cool. So let me focus on what's pretty cool and the positive. And it doesn't make your life any easier at all. Well, but it puts you in a better place.
I understand that, but if this person is he stuck, or have you been able to speak to him about viewing it from a different perspective?
I speak with them, but people know I'm going to say positive things. So after a while, some people block off your positive things. I remember in high school, girls would not date me because I was always so positive. They thought there was something wrong with me because I was always so chipper and happy. Yes. So I have that reputation for looking at the positive. And I feel that at this point, all I could do, in addition to making positive statements, is just lending an ear and letting the person, talk it through, and then throwing in a couple of, do you think of looking at it this ways? But
yeah. Now, this event that you're planning is in conjunction with the town of Tenafly?
The town is being very supportive in that they're making it easier for me, to have the event. But I have very big dreams for this event, and several of the people with whom I've shared the dreams, have seen the dream and believe that, this is something that can happen. So I've been getting a lot of cooperation, which is always excellent. But this is my event, and it's not really in partnership with anybody.
The event now, again?
The event is the Time Travel Fair. That's the one that's going to be in August. And Heroicon, which will repeat again in August, that's going to be one of the events of the Time Travel Fair. And the Time Travel,
So in other words, the Time Travel Fair is the overall umbrella?
Yes, the Time Travel Fair will link up all of these events that are in various stages of completion. Mm-hmm. The one in April is the first event that will be publicly held.
I see.
And then by August, there will be the vast theme will be revealed. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it's storytelling on a vast scale. I'm telling a story, and it's unfolding through these events that are going to be held in Tenafly, New Jersey.
Very good.
And Tenafly is awesome because in addition to it being a fantastic place to live, and I'm very involved with Tenafly. I'm in the Rotary Club in Tenafly. I'm on the Environmental Commission. I do a lot of things in Tenafly.
Are you also on their municipal board?
No, I'm not on the municipal board. I attend some of the meetings, but I'm currently in the Environmental Commission, and I'm currently in the Rotary.
And I also know that you welcome new businesses to Tenafly.
Yes, I'm the official herald for new business in Tenafly. I dress up in my Olympian panoply, and I wish new businesses well and welcome them to the town. And then we have a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and it's a lot of fun.
It sounds like fun. And what is the newest one? Was it the new jewelry shop that came in?
Yes, we had a jewelry shop that opened up. We had several nail places that opened up, and always restaurants that are opening up. So it's a pretty busy task, and it's a joyous task, and I get to meet a lot of wonderful people. I'm also a member of the Chamber of Commerce, so I attend those meetings, and that's one of the most fun things, actually. The Chamber of Commerce meeting. Oh, I love them.
I'm surprised to hear that. I would think that would be kind of a dry.
No. Always exciting. Always exciting.
Okay. Well, these events sound very wonderful, and would you like to tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure. Heroicon, one of the things I used to do...
well, first of all, let me back up a little bit, because you said that the Atlantis,
yes.
The Atlantis is the overall umbrella.
For Heroicon this time around, and we have a separate monthly activity, which you attended recently, called Star Center Atlantis.
Right.
And Star Center Atlantis is, in my talks that I do publicly, either through my workshops or through my Center for the Study of Living Myth at the Cresskill Library, we explore different topics, but they're usually pretty brief. They're an hour and a half. And some of them are more interactive than others, where I do most of the talking, but it's just, basically sharing information back and forth. With Star Center Atlantis, it's actually sitting down and using various techniques like guided visualization, using active imagination, using meditation, to experience Atlantis. And although we're studying different interpretations of Atlantis, starting with Plato and going all the way to the Unarius experience of Atlantis and the Mark Age experience of Atlantis, these are more modern metaphysical experiences of Atlantis. We're starting with this material because these people pioneered this type of exploration, so we should be familiar with what people who came before us found. But we're actually going to be using these techniques to find our own Atlantis.
Okay. Well, let's go back to the original. I think the interpretation of Atlantis that I have always read about was Plato's description it being beyond the
Pillars of Hercules.
Pillars of Hercules. There we go again. And I've actually seen pictures of them drawing the rings of the city with the canals and so forth. Now, is that's the oldest?
That is the oldest reference to Atlantis that sees the imagination. Herodotus talked about the cities around Mount Atlas, and he called those cities the Atlanteans.
Oh, really?
And I suspect that that's one of the roots for the legend, because Herodotus actually went and spoke to some of the same people that Plato had claimed that Solon had spoken to 80 years or so earlier. So he presented...
Herodotus was really a very respected
historian. He was the father of history or the father of lies, depending on who you spoke to. But the centuries have borne him out, and some of the things people thought he was exaggerating about, archaeological evidence now supports that it's real.
He was supposedly a brilliant historian. And now what the newer interpretations or versions of Atlantis, I'm not familiar with. How do they differ?
The later versions of Atlantis incorporate a foundation of theosophical teachings. And theosophy, the ancient theosophy, happened during the age of Alexander, when people who had not really communicated officially a great deal since the time of the Phoenicians all of a sudden were communicating again. And the people in Babylon, the people in Egypt, and the people in Greece and other places started comparing notes and finding that their esoteric or their hidden teachings were very similar. So they devised a concept where they said that, okay, in addition to the exoteric or external religious information, there is some internal religious information which is hidden from the profane, and you could get it through initiations or through joining various orders. And that was esoteric, and that was theosophia, or divine wisdom.
Right.
And then Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, in the latter portion of the 1800s, created a Theosophical Society where all the magical traditions that had existed up until then, because a lot of this information went underground when it started being hunted. So that started coming out again, and she introduced Eastern elements as well, like Buddhism and Hinduism and so forth. So that became the modern theosophy. So,
having read several of her books, she was an amazing. The amount of material research was truly remarkable.
Was remarkable.
Just remarkable, and trying to draw, analysis of such various cultures and finding the similarity and the going back to the ancient myths and so forth. I thought it was really quite remarkable.
Yeah, it was an accomplishment what she did, and regardless of what people thought about her personally or all the stories, the very fact that she gathered and collated all this information is more than most people accomplish in a lifetime. So we can't begrudge her that.
No, absolutely not. Okay, so now there's several things that you had wanted to mention, you told me, when we first sat down.
I think we covered them all during the course of our conversation, but I will repeat them. Currently, and I'm talking now from November 20th, 2015, I will be part of a book sale at the Cresskill Public Library. So if you're in or around Cresskill, you're welcome to come today and tomorrow. We have lots of books for sale. There will be health practitioners there giving massages and teaching healthful practices, and we'll have authors signing their books. So it'll be a fun thing if you're around today or tomorrow. Once a month at the Cresskill Public Library, we have the Center for the Study of Living Myth. Every single session between now and next fall has been scheduled. Oh. So if you check my website, you can find information on what we're doing there. And that's where Isabel and I met. So I hope to meet some more wonderful people there. And once a month, we also have Star Center Atlantis. Currently, that's at Yasu Mykonos Restaurant in Demarest. And we are planning for April 2016, Heroicon, the first ever, and Heroicon will be repeated several times a year. And in August, the Time Travel Fair.
Now, let me ask this. What time will Heroicon, will it be during the day and the evening?
Yes, it will be Saturday, April 16th.
May I borrow your pen and make a note of this
Sure.
for myself? Okay. April 16th.
Yes, Saturday, April 16th, 2016. From 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
From 10 to 3.
And we will have some of the presentations that will be in Heroicon. We're also going to do outside if we can, and so give people a taste. And if anyone resonates at all with Atlantis, whether it's the Atlantean priesthood or mermaids or any type of mythical sea creature, they're more than welcome to come. We love having them there.
Oh, great. Well, I think also we should really tell our audience a little bit about the fact that many people think that the world here in America that we're living in now is a repeat of many of the things in Atlantis. Atlantis
Yes.
is supposed to have been very sophisticated. Do you want to address that? They used crystals and
Sure.
so forth. Would you speak a little bit about supposedly what the Atlantean society was like? Because I think this is very interesting as it corresponds to our current world.
Okay. Many people, since the Atlantean legend has seized our imagination, have felt, especially Moore with his Utopia and Bacon with his New Atlantis, that America is the New Atlantis.
Yes.
And many psychics, the most famous being Edgar Cayce, also equated America with Atlantis. And I've heard time and again from folks who do past life therapy or who remember past lives that there's a lot of souls from Atlantis currently incarnate in America, and that America is undergoing an Atlantean cycle. The Atlanteans of old were more technically advanced than we are.
And more than the societies around them.
Yes, by far. Yeah. And what caused the revolution in their technology was mastery of the crystal.
Right.
Now, before we had the information age where everything depends on the crystal, our imagination created these giant crystal devices, that shot beams and things like that. And they may have had those because Archimedes, during the Hellenistic era and a little bit later during the Roman era, developed death rays by using mirrors and so forth. So they could have had crystal death rays. But even if they didn't, they knew that there was great power in crystals. And before the information age, during our lifetimes, anthropologists often sneered at primitive witch doctors or shaman who claimed that with crystals you could communicate with people over great distances, you could look into the past, the present, and the future. They had all these remarkable claims that now through the crystals and computers, we're finding that, yes, the computers have allowed us to do all the things that were mythology to these people, and that all of it was accurate.
I mean, look at how many different devices use crystals today. I mean, the computer, on and on and on. It's just amazing. And
by unlocking these secrets, also the Atlanteans developed a way of genetically altering people and making them more beast-like. And we are developing that ability. And actually, I think human carrot fusions have been made in labs, with the cells, and that a lot of people are concerned that through cloning and through genetic manipulation, we might, create new slave.
Why would the Atlanteans have wanted to create beasts or make
as slaves?
Oh, as slaves to do the labor.
Yeah, Edgar Casey, called them the Amanasa. But they were called other names, and they're remembered as the mythical beasts, like the Minotaur and the Centaurs. The Atlanteans, with their knowledge in this area, started breeding these hybrids and then using them for labor.
I see.
And now there's the fear that we're going to go along the same path. And a lot of people are questioning our practices with robots, too. The Atlanteans had artificial people. And these two are echoed in the Greek mythology of like Talos, the giant robot who guarded Crete, and the golden women who assisted Hephaestus in his forge. Those are all echoes of the types of things the Atlanteans did, according to all the information we've gotten since Plato first etched it in our consciousness.
So many of the things that were mythic are now showing up in our current society.
In our society.
But my sense was that the genetic engineering that's going on today is to improve the human, not to lessen the human. Or am I mistaken in this?
So we are told, and I'm sure so many people, wish it to be and are working towards its being. But there are other interests whose motives are not quite as honorable, who I'm sure are looking into this knowledge to create more destructive warrior type of people, less intelligent labor type of people, and those type of things pop up every now and then where people talk about this.
Well, I heard recently, I believe it was on the History Channel, that Hitler at one point was interested in creating a warrior race. He was trying to breed human beings with apes.
And I've heard the same thing, and a lot of interesting experiments were performed during those times, and some of them didn't work out, but if you look at it from their perspective, they wanted to breed a superior type of human, as you would want to breed a certain type of horse or a certain type of dog. Right. So they were using the same principles of selective breeding. And now with the climate changes that are taking place, animals in the wild are also interbreeding with each other and creating strange hybrids. So the Nazis are a really great example of taking this genetic manipulation, using it for purposes that might sound good to them, but for the rest of the world, they're not so great.
Well, thank God it was eminently unsuccessful.
Yes.
Eminently. They never produced one single creature, which was good. And supposedly the Atlanteans destroyed themselves.
Yes, and that's the whole purpose of our doing the Atlantis project, which includes the Star Center Atlantis. Atlantis is a mirror in which we can look in and see ourselves and
know what not to do.
And to question that. The Atlanteans did this, and yes, they reached great heights we can only dream of, but they destroyed themselves and almost destroyed the entire world and plunged it into darkness. So whatever choices we make now about the same technologies that are emerging, these will have effects on future generations, and we should be thoughtful before we decide which course of action we take. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with that.
Well, I think that's a very noble and very worthwhile thing to
accomplish.
Thank you. I wish you good luck.
Thank you.
And I thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you for having me.
It was great. And thank you so much for viewing this program, and I hope you will continue to check up on Lighten Up with Isabel for the next one. And au revoir. Thank you.
Joyous journeys.
Until next time, remember to live a more joyous life. Lighten up.
It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com